Ryan stood at the edge of the landing ramp, his eyes fixed on the world before him. The planet Atheris stretched wide under a silver sky, its fields glowing with colors he had never seen on Earth. Tall crystal trees swayed in the wind, their leaves shimmering like soft glass. Rivers cut through the land like ribbons of light, and far in the distance, mountains rose like sharp crowns. For a moment, he felt small, but also full of wonder. The people of Atheris waited at the foot of the ramp. They were tall, graceful, and carried themselves with an elegance that made them seem almost unreal. Their skin reflected soft shades of pearl and bronze, their hair long and flowing as if shaped by the wind itself. The humans in Ryan's group whispered to one another, unable to hide their awe. Even the older explorers who had seen many worlds stood silent, struck by the beauty of the scene. Ryan stepped down slowly, feeling the soft earth under his boots. The air was clear and fresh, carrying a sweet scent that filled his chest with warmth. At once the Atherians raised their voices in song, a greeting that rolled like waves over the visitors. It was unlike anything Ryan had heard before, a harmony that touched the heart and spoke without words. He almost forgot to breathe as the sound wrapped around him. At the center of the gathering stood a young woman named Lyra. She shone brighter than all the rest. Her gown was spun with threads of silver and pale blue, moving like water with every step she took. Her eyes held a glow that made many of the human visitors stare, unable to look away. When she lifted her hand in welcome, the song grew louder and more joyful. The crowd whispered her name with pride, for she was the jewel of Atheris, admired not only for her beauty but also for her voice and presence. Everyone around Ryan seemed sure of what would happen next. They nudged one another, quietly suggesting that Ryan would soon be drawn to Lyra, just as all visitors before him had been. She was the one expected to charm, the one expected to shine, and no one doubted that Ryan would notice her above all. Ryan did bow to Lyra when she stepped forward to greet him. He spoke politely, thanked her for the welcome, and offered a respectful smile. Yet his eyes, restless and curious, moved past her to the edges of the great hall where the crowd had gathered. There, half hidden, stood another figure. She wore no gown of silver or blue, only a plain dress the color of stone. Her hair was tied back with a simple cord, her head bowed as if she wished no one to see her. In her hands she carried trays of fruit and water, moving quietly to serve those who sat at the long tables. Whenever someone turned to thank her, she had already stepped away, fading back into the shadows. Her name was Nira, though few spoke it. She was not celebrated like Lyra, nor did anyone draw attention to her presence. While Lyra filled the hall with light, Nira seemed to blend with the walls. Yet Ryan's eyes followed her movements. He noticed the calm way she walked, the way she placed a drink before an elder before serving herself, the way she smiled gently when a child reached for fruit. No one cheered for her, but she carried herself with quiet grace. The celebration grew louder as night fell. The Atherians danced in circles, their robes sweeping like waves across the floor. Lyra sang at the heart of the hall, her voice rising high, drawing applause and laughter. Visitors clapped along, enchanted by her charm. Ryan clapped too, but his gaze still drifted toward the edge of the room where Nira slipped between the shadows, unnoticed. He wondered why no one spoke to her. She seemed part of the hall itself, like a pillar holding it all together without ever being seen. When their eyes met by chance across the room, she looked away quickly, almost shy. But in that single glance, Ryan felt something different, something he could not explain. It was not the dazzling pull of beauty or song, but a quiet spark that stirred his thoughts. The night ended with promises of trials and feasts to come. The Alien Council announced that the visitors would be tested, to prove their strength and learn from the ways of Atherus. Everyone cheered at the idea, their voices filling the hall. Ryan smiled politely, yet his thoughts wandered again to the quiet figure who had already disappeared before the final cheer. As he returned to his quarters, the voices of the others filled the air. They spoke endlessly of Lyra, of her gown, her song, her presence. They predicted Ryan would choose her for the trial ahead, just as tradition suggested. But Ryan stayed silent. He thought instead of the one no one noticed, the one whose name he had not yet heard, the one who carried trays and smiled softly at children before vanishing into the shadows. In that silence, a thought grew in his mind, though he told no one. Perhaps beauty was not always where the crowd pointed. Perhaps the most important presence was the one no one saw. The next morning the humans were led through the wide streets of the Atherian city. Ryan walked with his group, but his mind was still busy with thoughts of the quiet figure he had noticed the night before. The city itself was a wonder. Homes were carved into tall crystal towers that caught the sunlight and sent colors dancing across the ground. Bridges curved like ribbons between the buildings, and streams of water flowed below them, carrying small boats from one side to the other. Everywhere he looked, Athera seemed alive with light and movement. The people welcomed the visitors with smiles and songs. They offered flowers, fruits, and even small ornaments carved from stone. At the center of the tour was again Lyra, who walked proudly at the front. She spoke with confidence, describing the city's history, its gardens, its schools, and its temples. She shone as brightly in daylight as she had in the hall the night before, and many humans admired her. Ryan listened politely, but his attention often wandered. He noticed the smaller details, the way children played near fountains, the way merchants called to one another with laughter, and how the older Atherians sat quietly in shaded corners, watching the younger ones move with energy. Among these details, his eyes kept searching for the quiet figure he had seen. It was in one of the gardens that he saw her again. Nero was kneeling near a bed of tall silver flowers, placing fresh water at their roots. Her plain dress was touched with the soft dust of the garden paths, and her hands were careful as she worked. She did not notice the visitors at first, for her focus was on the flowers. When she finally looked up, her eyes met Ryan's for the second time. She seemed surprised, almost uneasy, and lowered her gaze quickly. Still, Ryan stepped away from the group, curious. "You take care of the flowers," he said softly, unsure if she would answer. Nira gave a small nod. "Yes. They are part of the city. They must be cared for, or they will fade." Her voice was gentle, almost like the sound of the wind moving through leaves. Ryan smiled. "You seem to care for more than flowers. I saw you last night, helping the elders." A faint color touched her face, and she lowered her head again. "It is nothing important. Others bring light to the hall. I only do what is needed." Before Ryan could say more, Lyra's voice rang out. She called for the group to continue, and the visitors moved on. Ryan glanced back once, but Nira had already returned to her flowers. The day passed with more songs, dances, and stories. Everywhere, the people celebrated their guests. Lyra spoke often, her words full of pride. The other humans seemed caught by her beauty and her charm. Yet Ryan's thoughts lingered on Nira's quiet reply. She had spoken so little, yet it felt as though her words carried a deeper truth. That evening the council gathered the visitors again. They explained that the trial of endurance would soon begin. Each human was to choose a guide from among the Atherians, someone who would walk beside them through the wild forests and show them the ways of the land. The trial was not meant to harm but to test wisdom, patience, and strength. The humans whispered with excitement. They already knew who they wanted to guide them. Lyra was the choice of many, and she accepted their requests with grace. All expected Ryan to do the same. When the council turned to him, waiting for his answer, Ryan felt every eye upon him. Lyra stood proudly, her silver gown glowing in the firelight of the hall. Everyone seemed sure he would call her name. Yet Ryan hesitated. His mind returned to the garden, to the quiet figure kneeling by the flowers, to the gentle voice that spoke without pride. "May I choose freely?" Ryan asked, his voice steady. The council nodded. "Yes. You may choose anyone who is willing to walk with you." Ryan looked past the shining circle of dancers and singers. At the edge of the hall, almost hidden as before, stood Nira. She held a tray of fruit, her head slightly bowed, unaware that anyone was watching her. "I choose her," Ryan said, pointing gently toward Nira. The hall grew silent. Some laughed softly, thinking he had made a mistake. Others frowned in confusion. Lyra herself looked surprised, her confident smile faltering for the first time. The council followed his gaze. "You choose Nira?" one elder asked slowly. "Yes," Ryan answered with calm certainty. "I choose Nira." The quiet one raised her head at last. Her eyes widened in shock, as if she could not believe what she had heard. The tray trembled slightly in her hands. For a long moment she stood frozen, caught between the shadows and the sudden weight of every gaze in the room. No one had expected this choice. No one had thought the quiet one would ever be noticed. Yet now all attention turned to her, and to the human who had spoken her name with such clear voice. The night after the council meeting, the city of Atheris was alive with whispers. Ryan's choice had surprised everyone. The other humans spoke quietly among themselves, some curious, some confused. Why would he choose Nira, the one no one noticed, when Lyra stood shining before them like a jewel? Even the Atherians, who had long admired Lyra, could not understand it. Nira herself was troubled. She had never been chosen for anything important. Her days were filled with quiet work, caring for the gardens, carrying food, helping the elders. To stand before the council as someone's chosen guide felt heavy on her shoulders. She sat alone that evening, wondering if she should refuse. Yet when she remembered the calm certainty in Ryan's eyes, she felt something stir inside her, something she had not known in a long time: courage. The next morning, the council gathered everyone in the great square. The trial of endurance was about to begin. Each human stood beside their chosen guide. Lyra stood proudly at the front, her silver gown replaced by travel clothes that still carried signs of her grace. Many humans had asked for her, and she smiled at the crowd, sure that she would lead them well. Ryan stood quietly at the side, with Nira beside him. She wore the same plain dress, though now she carried a simple bag across her shoulder. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes stayed low, avoiding the stares of the crowd. Yet Ryan noticed how her steps were steady, how her hands did not shake as she adjusted the strap of her bag. The chief elder raised his staff. "The trial is not a test of beauty or song," he declared. "It is a test of patience, wisdom, and the strength to endure the wilds of our land. You will walk through the forest of Atheris, face its challenges, and return with proof that you have learned from your guide." The gates of the city opened, and the group stepped forward. The forest lay beyond, tall and endless, its trees rising like towers of green and silver. Strange calls echoed through the branches, and streams glistened under the light of the sun. It was a place of both wonder and danger, and it waited to test all who entered. As the groups moved on, Lyra's voice carried back through the trees. She laughed, speaking proudly of her knowledge, her steps quick and full of energy. The humans who followed her felt confident, certain they had chosen well. Ryan and Nira, however, walked in silence for a time. He watched her as she studied the path. She touched the bark of trees, glanced at the sky, and listened to the calls of unseen creatures. At last she spoke. "We should move more slowly," she said softly. "The forest does not welcome loud voices or rushing feet. If we walk with care, it will guide us." Ryan nodded without question. He matched his steps to hers, following her lead. Soon she showed him small details he would have missed. She pointed to a trail of broken leaves that revealed the movement of animals. She showed him berries safe to eat and others that carried sickness. She knelt by a stream and taught him how to read the flow of water to know which path led deeper into the forest. The day passed in steady travel. Ryan felt his respect for Nira grow with each step. She did not boast of her knowledge, yet every choice she made kept them safe. When the ground grew slippery, she guided him around hidden stones. When the air grew heavy, she found shaded places to rest. She never rushed, never demanded, only shared her knowledge with quiet strength. By evening, they reached a clearing where the trees opened to the sky. Nira gathered wood and showed Ryan how to build a fire with stones. The flames grew small but steady, pushing back the shadows. Ryan sat beside it, watching her work. "You know this forest well," he said with admiration. She gave a small smile. "I have walked it since I was a child. My people did not notice, but the forest always did. It teaches those who listen." Ryan looked at her thoughtfully. "Then perhaps that is why I chose you. You listen where others only speak." For a moment, Nira's eyes lifted to meet his. There was surprise in them, but also a quiet warmth. She did not answer, but the silence between them felt full, not empty. Far away, laughter echoed through the forest. It was Lyra and her group, still loud, still full of pride. Their voices carried on the wind, but already they sounded less certain, less strong. Ryan wondered how they would fare as the forest grew darker and more demanding. As night fell, the trial had only just begun. Yet in that quiet clearing, Ryan and Nira sat beside the fire, calm and steady. While others rushed forward with pride, they had found a different path, one of patience, one of trust. And though no one else saw it, something was changing. The quiet one no one noticed was beginning to shine, not with bright gowns or songs, but with knowledge, courage, and a presence that could not be ignored forever. The forest of Atharis was alive with sound. Birds with golden wings called from the tree-tops, their cries echoing through the branches. Insects glowed softly in the shadows, drifting like sparks of light between the leaves. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of moss and river water. To Ryan it felt both strange and welcoming, a place that held secrets waiting to be found. Nira walked ahead of him with steady steps. Her plain dress brushed against the tall grass, and her careful hands moved branches aside so the path would be clear. She did not rush, nor did she speak often, but every movement showed purpose. Ryan followed closely, his eyes open to all that she revealed. "Look there," Nira said softly, pointing to a cluster of vines that curled around a tree. "This plant carries water inside its stems. If you cut it carefully, you can drink." She broke a small piece, tilting it so that clear drops fell into Ryan's hand. He tasted it and felt cool freshness on his tongue. "You know so much," Ryan said with quiet respect. Nira shook her head. "The forest teaches those who watch. Most do not watch. They look only at what shines, not at what lasts." Her words reminded Ryan of the city, where everyone looked at Lyra, while Nira worked in silence at the edge of the hall. He nodded slowly, seeing truth in her thought. The day grew warmer as they walked deeper. The trees rose higher, their leaves spreading wide to block much of the sky. Light filtered down in soft beams, painting the ground with shifting patterns. Every sound seemed louder here: the crack of a branch, the distant rush of water, the call of unseen animals. Ryan kept his hand near the staff he carried, though Nira showed no sign of fear. She moved as if the forest itself guided her. When they reached a river, wide and fast, she pointed to stones hidden just beneath the surface. "We cross there," she said. "Step where I step, and you will not fall." Ryan followed her carefully across the rushing water. Twice he slipped, but each time she turned back, offering her hand with calm strength. Her grip was firm, steady, and it gave him confidence. When they reached the far side, he smiled. "You carry yourself as if you have walked these paths 1,000 times, he said. "I have," she replied simply. "When I was younger, I often came here to bring herbs to the healers. Few cared for such work, so it became mine." Ryan thought of how others overlooked her, yet here in the forest her knowledge was priceless. He realized more clearly why his heart had chosen her instead of the shining jewel everyone admired. By afternoon the forest changed again. The ground rose into hills, covered in thick vines. Strange calls echoed closer, and Ryan felt a chill though the sun was still high. Nira slowed her pace, her eyes moving carefully from tree to tree. "There are watchers here," she whispered. "Watchers?" Ryan asked, lowering his voice. "Animals that guard their ground. They will not harm us if we show respect, but we must move with care." She bent low, guiding him along a narrow path between roots. Ryan followed, his heart beating faster. Shapes moved in the shadows, tall and swift, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Yet none attacked, for Nira's steps were soft, her presence calm. Slowly, the glowing eyes faded back into the forest, and the silence grew gentle again. Ryan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Without you, I would have walked too loudly," he admitted. "I would have been lost." Nira gave a small smile. "That is why the council called it a trial. Not to test the forest, but to test you. The forest answers only to those who walk with patience." Evening came, painting the sky with soft orange light through the canopy. They found a small clearing where a stream trickled over smooth stones. Nira gathered leaves to make bedding, while Ryan built a fire as she had shown him before. When the flames grew steady, they shared fruit and bread from her bag. As they ate, Ryan asked, "Do you ever wish to be noticed, as Lyra is?" Nira sat quietly for a moment. Her eyes reflected the firelight, but her voice was calm when she answered. "No. To be noticed is not always to be free. Lyra must always shine, always carry the weight of many eyes. I am content with quiet work. But," she hesitated, then continued, "sometimes it feels as if I do not exist at all." Ryan studied her face. "You exist," he said firmly. "I see you." Her eyes lifted to his, surprised by the certainty in his tone. For a long moment they sat in silence, the forest around them humming with soft night sounds. Above them the stars began to appear, bright against the dark sky. Ryan lay back on the grass, staring at the endless lights. He thought of Earth, of the long journey that had brought him here, and of the unexpected choice he had made. Beside him, Nira moved quietly, adding wood to the fire. She did not speak, yet her presence filled the clearing with calm strength. In that moment Ryan felt certain that he had chosen well, though others did not yet understand. The trial was still ahead. The forest would test them again, perhaps more harshly than before. But as the night deepened, Ryan knew he would not walk alone. The quiet one no one noticed had become his guide, and her steady light was more powerful than all the shining songs of the hall. Morning came with a silver mist hanging low over the forest. The air was cool and damp, and drops of water clung to every leaf. Ryan rose from the soft bed of leaves Nira had made and stretched his arms. The fire had burned down to ashes, but the warmth still lingered. Nira was already awake, kneeling by the stream to fill a small jar with fresh water. "You rise early," Ryan said, stepping closer. "The forest begins its work with the sun," she replied with a small smile. "We must follow its rhythm if we wish to endure." They shared a simple meal of fruit and bread, then began their journey once more. The forest seemed different in the morning light. The trees glistened with dew, and the calls of unseen birds echoed from above. For a while, their path was calm, and Ryan felt a quiet peace. By midday, however, the forest changed. The ground grew soft and uneven, covered in thick moss. Strange vines hung from the trees, curling like snakes across the path. The air grew heavier, carrying the scent of damp earth. Nira slowed her steps, her eyes scanning the ground. "This place is not safe," she said softly. Ryan tightened his grip on his staff. "Why?" "The earth hides hollows beneath the moss," Nira explained. "If you step carelessly, the ground will give way." Ryan followed her carefully, placing his feet where hers had pressed the moss flat. He felt the ground shift once, but her steady hand guided him to safety. Still, a quiet unease filled him. The forest, which had seemed so calm before, now felt like it was watching them. The danger revealed itself not long after. As they crossed a narrow ridge, dark clouds gathered suddenly overhead. A strong wind rose, bending the tall trees and carrying with it a strange sound, like a low roar. Nira's eyes widened. "It is a storm," she said quickly. "We must find shelter." Rain began to fall in heavy drops, soaking their clothes. The path grew slippery, and the wind howled through the branches. Ryan struggled to keep his footing, but Nira held his arm and led him down into a small valley where the trees stood closer together. "There," she pointed, showing a dark opening in the rock wall. "A cave. We will be safe there." Together they hurried through the rain, the storm pressing harder with every step. At last they reached the cave and stepped inside. The walls were cool and damp, but the ceiling was high enough to give them space. Nira gathered dry leaves and branches from the cave floor, and soon a small fire burned, pushing back the cold. Ryan sat near the flames, his clothes dripping, his heart still beating fast. "Without you, I would have been lost out there," he admitted. Nira placed more wood on the fire, her hands steady. "The forest gives warnings. Few listen. The storm will pass, but it will leave the land changed. Paths will be washed away. We must wait until it clears." As the rain hammered outside, Ryan looked at her with growing respect. She did not seem afraid, even as thunder shook the air. Instead, she sat calmly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. You speak as if the forest is alive, he said. It is, she answered. Not in the way we are, but in its own way. It tests us. Those who walk proudly, without care, often fail. Those who walk humbly, listening, find a way forward. Her words stayed with Ryan. He thought of the others who had chosen Lyra, loud in their laughter and confident in their steps. He wondered how they faced the storm, whether they had found shelter or struggled in the rain. Hours passed as the storm raged on. Lightning lit the cave entrance in brief flashes, and the wind roared like a living thing. Yet within the cave, the fire gave warmth, and Nira's presence gave calm. To pass the time, Ryan asked her about her life. Slowly, she shared small pieces. She told him of her childhood, how she had learned the paths of the forest while others trained in music and dance. She explained how her role had always been quiet service, never praise. Do you wish for a different life? Ryan asked. Nira shook her head. I do not dream of shining before others. I only wish to be of use, to give something that lasts. If someone remembers me for that, it is enough. Ryan's voice grew firm. Then you should be remembered. You have already given more than you know. Nero looked at him with quiet surprise. For a moment, the storm outside seemed far away. When the rain finally began to ease, the forest lay silent, broken only by the drip of water from the leaves. The ground was soaked, and streams had grown wider, cutting across old paths. The trial had grown harder, yet Ryan felt no fear. With Nero beside him, he felt guided not only through the forest but through something greater. She was no longer just the quiet one no one noticed. To him, she was becoming the voice of wisdom, the steady hand that showed the true way forward. The storm had tested them, and though it roared with all its strength, they had endured. The path ahead would be longer, but Ryan knew now more than ever that he had chosen rightly. The morning after the storm, the forest was quiet in a new way. Mist hung low between the trees, and drops of water sparkled on every branch. The ground was soft beneath their feet, and streams ran faster than before, carrying fallen leaves with them. Ryan and Nira stepped carefully, moving through the wet paths. Nira walked ahead as always, her steps steady. She studied the ground before choosing each direction. Ryan followed close behind, feeling grateful for her guidance. The forest no longer seemed like an enemy. It felt alive, full of lessons, and he could sense them more clearly because of Nira. Do you think the others are safe? Ryan asked as they moved. Nira paused for a moment, listening to the calls of the forest. Some will be safe, some will struggle. The storm was not cruel, but it tested them. If they walked with pride, they will find the forest less kind. Ryan nodded, remembering the laughter of Lyra's group. He wondered if their voices still rang through the trees, or if silence had replaced them. By midday they reached a high ridge where the trees opened, giving them a view of the land below. From there they could see the city of Atharis in the far distance, its crystal towers catching the sunlight. Between the forest and the city lay wide fields and shining rivers. It was still a long walk, but the sight of home filled Ryan with renewed strength. We are close, he said with relief. Nira smiled faintly. Close, but the trial is not complete. The forest does not release us until we return with proof. As they continued, they came upon a tree larger than any Ryan had seen before. Its trunk was wide as a house, and its branches stretched high into the sky. Nira approached it with quiet respect. This is an elder tree, she explained. The council will know we have walked the true path if we bring a branch from it. but the tree will only give if asked with care. She placed her hand on the trunk and whispered softly in her own language. After a moment she reached up and touched a low branch. It came loose gently, as if offered. She handed it to Ryan. "Carry this," she said. "It will show that we have learned from the forest, not just passed through it." Ryan held the branch carefully. Its wood felt smooth and warm, as though it carried the strength of the tree within it. He looked at Nero with gratitude. "I will carry it with honor." The path grew easier after that, as if the forest itself had accepted them. Birds sang again, and the air grew lighter. They walked until evening, when the trees began to thin. The glow of the city was visible through the branches. When they stepped out of the forest at last, a crowd was waiting. The people of Atharis had gathered to see who would return and what they would bring. Lyra was already there with her group, though they looked weary. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled, and the proud smile she once wore had dimmed. Still, she stood tall, holding a bundle of bright flowers as her proof. When Ryan and Nira appeared, a murmur spread through the crowd. Ryan carried the branch of the elder tree, and Nira walked at his side, her plain dress damp but her steps calm. Together they looked strong, not from shining beauty but from steady endurance. The council called them forward. "Tell us what you have learned," an elder asked. Ryan lifted the branch. "I learned that the forest is not conquered by pride. It welcomes patience, respect, and quiet strength. I could not have walked its paths without Nira, who sees what others do not. She was my guide, and through her I learned more than I thought possible." The crowd grew silent. Many glanced at Nira, some with surprise, others with new respect. She lowered her head, unused to such attention, but Ryan's steady voice carried weight. Lyra stepped forward then, her voice still graceful though softer than before. "I brought flowers that bloom after storms. They show beauty even in hardship. Yet I see now that beauty fades when the heart does not endure." The council nodded at both offerings, but their eyes lingered on the elder tree's branch. It was rare, and it proved that Ryan and Nira had walked deeply into the forest, learning its hidden ways. One elder raised his staff. "The trial is complete. Some brought beauty, some brought strength, but only one brought the wisdom of the elder tree. Let this show us that true worth is not always in what shines before the eye, but in what stands steady in silence." The crowd bowed their heads, and for the first time, Nira's name was spoken with respect. Children whispered it to one another, and elders nodded with approval. The quiet one had been noticed at last. As the people celebrated, Ryan turned to her. "You see," he said gently. "You are not forgotten. You have always been more than you believed." Her eyes met his, soft with gratitude. "You gave me a place to be seen. For that, I thank you." The sun set behind the crystal towers, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. The trial of endurance had ended, but something greater had begun. A human and the quiet one stood together, and their bond spoke louder than any song in the hall. The city of Atharis shone in the evening light. Its tall crystal towers glowed softly as the people gathered in the grand square. Tonight was the final ceremony of the trial. Every traveler who had entered the forest would stand before the council, and their journey would be judged. The people waited with excitement, for it was a rare event that joined human and alien together in tradition. Ryan stood among the other visitors, the branch of the elder tree still in his hands. Beside him stood Nira, quiet as always, though her presence now carried a different weight. No longer was she hidden in the shadows. The people had seen her calm strength when she walked from the forest with Ryan, and whispers of her name spread even now among the crowd. The council stepped forward, their long robes catching the firelight from the great torches. The eldest among them raised his staff, and silence fell. "The trial of endurance has ended," he declared. "Many walked into the forest, and many have returned. Each brought a proof of their path. Each proof holds meaning, yet meaning is greater when shared with wisdom." One by one, the groups were called forward. Lyra stepped ahead with her bright flowers. She held them high, her voice graceful as she spoke of beauty after hardship. The people admired her, for her charm still shone, but her proof seemed lighter than before. The council accepted her words yet offered no great praise. Then Ryan and Nero were called. Together they walked to the center, and Ryan lifted the branch of the elder tree. The crowd leaned closer, for it was rare to see such a gift. "This branch was not taken by force," Ryan said clearly. "It was offered when we showed respect. Nira guided me with patience, and because of her, I learned that strength is not loud. True worth lies in steady hands and quiet hearts." The council nodded slowly. Their eyes fell on Nira, who stood with her head lowered but her back straight. One elder spoke. "You were always among us, yet unseen. Now you are seen. The forest has shown your value." The people cheered softly, some with surprise, some with pride. Nira's face warmed, though she did not seek the noise of their voices. She looked instead at Ryan, whose steady presence gave her courage. After all proofs had been presented, the eldest council member raised his staff once more. "The trial has shown us many lessons. Some showed grace, some showed courage, but one stood above, carrying the wisdom of the elder tree. Let this wisdom guide us. Let us honor both human and Aetherian for what they have shared." The square filled with cheers. Music rose, and the celebration began. Dancers stepped into the circle, and voices lifted in song. Yet among all the movement, many eyes turned again to Ryan. For tradition said that when a visitor chose a companion, the bond was sealed before all. Everyone believed he would step toward Lyra, the shining beauty of Aetheris. It seemed natural, expected, almost certain. But Ryan did not move toward her. Instead, he turned to Nira. The square grew still, as if the very air held its breath. He took Nira's hand gently and raised it for all to see. His voice was calm but strong. "I choose not the one the crowd noticed first, but the one whose quiet strength carried me through the trial. I choose Nira." A wave of whispers rushed through the crowd. Some gasped in shock, some frowned with disbelief, but many smiled with understanding. For they had seen the truth in his words. Lyra stood at the side, her smile gentle though touched with sadness. She bowed her head gracefully, then spoke aloud so all could hear. "The human has chosen with wisdom. May their bond remind us that beauty is more than what the eyes see." The council stepped forward. "So it is decided. Let this bond be honored. Let it remind us that even the quiet ones carry light." The people raised their hands in respect. The music began again, louder and fuller, and the celebration carried into the night. But in the heart of the square, Ryan and Nira stood together. Nira's voice was soft when she spoke to him. "You could have chosen another. You could have chosen the one everyone expected." Ryan smiled. "I never cared for what was expected. I cared for what was true. You showed me the way when all others looked elsewhere. You are the one I trust, the one I wish to walk beside." Her eyes glimmered, not with pride but with quiet joy. For the first time, she felt seen not only by one person, but by all. The world that once passed her by had finally paused to notice her. As the night sky filled with stars, the people of Atheris danced and sang. The human visitors joined them, their laughter mixing with the alien songs. And in the center of it all, a quiet bond had been formed, stronger than expectation, stronger than tradition. Ryan had chosen not the beauty who dazzled the crowd, but the one who had been unnoticed, steady, and true. And in that choice, humanity gave a lesson to the stars. Greatness is not only in what shines, but also in what stands quietly, guiding, unseen until the right eyes find it. The ceremony ended, but the story of Ryan and Nero was only beginning. Together they would face what the future brought, side by side, their bond a symbol of courage, wisdom, and the power of seeing what others overlook.